Hey everyone, so we're going to be walking through Photoshop. I'm going to be breaking it down into chapters, so any section that you want to really focus on, you can scroll and you can find it and review. We're going to start by first opening up Photoshop. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a new file. And right here we have a lot of options to choose from. We're just going to go over here and name our project. I'm just going to call it Project Demo, kind of going after our naming convention, and then put my initials. So what we have is we have our dimensions right here. And so it's going to be set to 1920 by 1080 for us. It might be set to something else for you on default, but I would change it to 1920 by 1080. That's just our kind of standard screen format. And it's going to be set to pixels, which is great. Our resolution, yours might be set to 72. I usually like to animate in 300. It just means that there are more pixels per inch and your image is going to be clearer, especially when it's projected on a bigger screen. So all of this looks great. Background content, this is going to create a layer when we open up our comp that's just going to be a background white solid, like kind of like a piece of paper that you're going to be drawing on top of, and it's going to be locked. You're going to see it in just a second. But that is our first step. We're just going to hit create. And I'm going to get it looking kind of closer to how it probably looks for you. And that's it. Okay, so here we're going to introduce some things about Photoshop. And we're not going to be animating in this section, this chapter, but I am going to introduce you to a few of the core things that make Photoshop Photoshop. So we're going to talk about layers, which are going to be located right in this area. We are going to talk about a little bit about color. We're going to talk about some of our tools, but don't worry, we're only going to focus on maybe about 4 of these. And I'm going to say the hotkeys as I'm going through them. And then we're also going to focus a little bit on our brush. So to start, Photoshop is a layer-based program, which means that the more layers that we add, you can add layers right down here. It's going to add a transparent layer just by default. And the more that we add, I'm going to click over here, grab a color, grab like a pink or a red, just kind of flip it through like that. And you can select your brush using B. You can also come over to your toolbar and select your brush right there. And I am going to just create a circle. And I'm using my Cintiq to just draw right on this transparent layer, layer 1 that I just created. If you want to increase your brush size, you can come right over here to the brush settings, click it, make it bigger or smaller, depending on what you want. So you'll see that I have my default brushes kind of like in their own file, and then I have these 2 other brush sets that I downloaded from the internet. One of the reasons why Photoshop is such a cool tool to animate in. There's so many user-created brushes out there. Anyway, back to this. We're on our layer 1. We've created our pink little circle. We're going to create another layer, layer 2. We're going to make this something very different looking as far as like color. So we're going to draw it right kind of on top. And then I'm going to grab layer 2 using my Cintiq, and I'm going to drag it kind of around right below layer 1. You'll see kind of what I mean, where it's like Photoshop is very additive with layers. Stack the layers on top, so the layers that are stacked below are going to be underneath. I'm going to delete both of those layers, and I selected them holding Shift. Whenever you want to undo something, so say I just deleted those 2 layers, but I'm like, oh wait, no, I love those layers. You can Control Z, and that will bring it back. Control Z is undo, and then if you want to redo, it's Control Shift Z. Control Z to undo, Control Shift Z to redo. Delete those. And I'm going to create a background layer because for our animation, we're going to be just doing a pretty simple animation, but I want it to have a background that doesn't move. So for that, we can definitely do it just on a basic layer like one of these. I'm going to bring it down size a little bit. I'm just going to do it so simple. I'm just going to draw a straight line. And I'm going to come over here to my layer 1. I'm going to double click it, call it background layer. And because I'm not going to move that during my animation, I'm actually going to lock it. So that way, if I grab the cursor tool, the move tool right here, if I tried to move it, it's not going to actually select it. If I unlock it, I can move it all across the screen. But if I lock it, it's just going to stay right in place, which is going to be great for a background. Okay, so for this section, we're going to be creating a video timeline, and we're going to be talking a little bit about video groups. So everything looks the same as from where we left off. We are going to go over to our window. So right over here, click window. We're going to bring up our timeline. So I'm just going to click timeline, create video timeline. I'm going to click that. The first thing that we want to do before we focus on anything over here, we want to go over to our 4 little horizontal lines. We want to click them. This is where some of our animation properties kind of are. So for now, all we need to focus on is just going straight to our set timeline frame rate. And we're going to change this to 24 frames per second. That means for every minute, we're going to have, essentially we can cut up our clips into 24 different specific frames. So we're going to click OK. And 24 frames is pretty much the standard when it comes to animation. If we wanted to make 12 frames per second or 6 frames per second, we technically could. So I'm going to zoom in and I'm going to show you kind of what that looks like. So by default, each of these different layers is going to be set to 5 seconds. So if we have 1 minute, yeah, that means that we have 24 frames here. It's kind of marked out just like that. So our background layer is locked, so that's fine. You can see that we have our face layer and our background layer. They're right there. They're looking great. For now, we're going to want to create a video layer, and a video layer is the actual layer that we will be animating on. So we're going to start by just doing what we already are familiar with, which is creating a new layer. Just going to create one. I'm going to create it right down there. I'm going to just drag this over here, drag it to the very top. You can actually like pull it way back too, but I would just kind of pull it right to the front of the playhead. And so why we create a video layer is because say that I want to animate 2 frames, just 1 image on 2 frames. In order to do that, I don't want this. If I drew a picture, for instance, say that one of my frames, I wanted just to have like a circle right there, but I only want it to be on screen for 2 frames. Well, that's a problem because this is going to be on screen the entire time, just kind of like our background layer is. Say I wanted to cut that, make it 2 frames. Well, I'm going to use the erase tool and erase this. It's a problem because every single time we cut the frame to draw a new image in our animation, it's just going to create this like long chain. So we don't want that. We want to go back to Control Z, undoing all of that. We're going to go back to just this layer and we're going to click right next to this film stock and we're going to say new video group from clip. That has created a video group. So now you can see that if I want to last 2 frames, great. Now I can chop it, which is awesome. This is very helpful. Say that if you know that you want to work with a bunch of frames and maybe you're doing just like animation, like one to the next, and you're not using keyframes, which we'll talk about keyframes in the next chapter. Say you wanted more of these, we can actually come up here and go layer, duplicate layers, and just duplicate it that way. Because it's in a video layer, it's just going to bring them right to the back. So all of this is doing a good job at setting us up for animation. Say that we want our little ball that we're going to draw. Say that I want my animation to begin here. And I want the next frame to be way over here. And I want to do a frame in between to kind of unite those two things. Well, then I'm going to want to turn on onion skin. So you can turn on onion skins by going over here, clicking enable onion skins. And you can tweak the onion skin settings to get it so you can see both of the frames of animation so that you can draw the frame in between. So right now it's just set to 1 frame before, 1 frame after. Let's see what 2 frames. before, 2 frames after looks like. So you can now kind of start to slightly see it. Go 3. Okay, there we go. Now we can see both of the frames in the shot. We're gonna click OK. And the frame that we're on currently has nothing on it. Oh, never mind. That frame actually is our final frame. So let's drag a frame that we know has nothing on it in the middle. And now we can actually animate middle. If we want to make this even smoother, we can take another one of our frames, transparent frame that has nothing on it, and we can animate those two as well. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start getting into the habit of color coding my frame, my keyframe. We'll make those orange. And then we'll just keep those for now. And still using our onion skins set on, I can start to make some in-between animation. Then now that those in-betweens are done, I'm going to make them zoom in using that. And also make them as long as the other frames. I'm going to color code them as well. Coming over here, right click, orange, and you can make them whatever color you want. I tend to like to have my in-between frames to be separate colors so I can kind of tell. And now I'm just going to do in-between, final in-between, Control C to undo that. It's looking great. We'll turn off our onion skins and we will bring our playhead back to here. This is so we can see the looping playback of what we just made. We're going to make sure to come over here to our little wheel, make sure loop playback is checked. Resolution is at 30% right now. That's fine. And if we press spacebar, we should be able to see the animation that we just made. And now instead of calling this video group 1, I'm going to rename it, double click, our rough lines. Now I am going to add a new layer. I'm going to do new video group from clips. And I'm going to immediately call this one our final line. These are going to be our more polished lines. So to do that, I'm going to essentially draw over these layers, these rough lines. But I'm going to actually go to the group of our rough lines that they're in. You can do the drop down to see all of our frames in there. I am going to take the opacity right down here, and I'm just going to bring it down. And you can see it kind of making it, I can completely make it invisible. Opacity at 0, opacity at 100 makes it completely invisible. So just keep that in your mind. Opacity equals kind of visibility, how transparent. Let's just keep it at 50, around 59. That's great. I can lock them if I want. So these are our final lines. So what I'm going to do, just because it's on a video layer, we can now cut freely. Just gonna follow as many frames as we have beneath. I'm gonna delete this just because I get tired of using that the little paper cutting thing. And I'm gonna go to layer, duplicate layers. It's just gonna quickly kind of like have us get a few more. All of these are transparent layers that I'm making. Nothing is on them. And I'm going to grab a brush that I like, so I'll still just be in the defaults, general brushes. I'm going to grab, not one of these, maybe, yeah, Kyle Ultimate Pen. I actually use this one in a lot of my personal animation. A good brush. I am going to make it a little, yeah, something small like this. All of that's good. Some of the brushes have less capabilities than others. No, it's just about the default and presets. Every brush is a little different. And I'm now just going to trace, make sure that I have a black set, the color. I want to have black lines. And you know, I can actually come to this background layer too. Unlock it for a second, bring down the opacity just so that I can see it a little bit better. And I can lock it again. Then I'm going to come over here. I'm just going to draw over. You can click Control Plus, or if you have touch capability, you can get really close in. I'm just going to draw over my rough lines so that everything looks like a polished final line that I want. Awesome. So these are our final lines. Looks pretty cool with the rough lines beneath, right? So I'm actually not going to delete these rough lines. I'm just going to hide them, and I'm going to lock them again. It's looking pretty cool. Maybe we want our background layer to now be a little bit more exciting. So I'm going to actually add a layer on top of our background layer, make sure that it's right on top. And maybe I want to create some mountain. The mountain. Some clouds. And a river. And yeah, that's going to be it. And maybe a sun beneath. Cool. So that is my new background layer. I'm just going to call it background 1 or background lines. Be specific. I'm going to put these both, I'm going to select both of them by holding Shift. So I'm going to quick hold Shift, put together. I'm going to put them in a group. So this group layer creation is right next to our layer tool. Click the both, create group 1. And I'm going to keep all of my background layers in here. I'm just going to call it background group. You can also just call it background if you want, whatever it keeps you organized. I'm actually going to change the color of this background just to kind of make it a little easier while I'm coloring my circle. And to do that, very simply, I'm going to add a layer style. So I mentioned layer styles in our class, but to refresh, right over here, this FX, you can add a layer style this way, just by clicking, color overlay. That's kind of what we want to use, and mine is set to normal on default. Yeah, clicking this color, you can change to any color that you want. So that looks pretty nice. I keep it there. All these you can experiment with as much as you want. I will let you go full, have a lot of fun with that whenever you want to. But for now, we're going to keep it simple, just this one color overlay. The one that I use all the time. It's also very easy to deactivate. Going here, clicking effects will deactivate all your layer styles that you have on any specific group or layer. So we're going to activate them. And now we are going to add some color to our circle. We're going to color. So I'm going to do what I always do. I'm going to create a new layer. And I'm going to make this a video group. Oops, sorry. Make this new video group from clips. Great. And we're going to see that on top, which kind of how I made it. Drop that down. So we can actually just drag this. First, I'm going to title it my color. We are going to drag this below our final line, but above our rock. So it's going to be right in between. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to just match all of these frames. Then I'm going to do which is duplicate. Okay, so these are our color layers. Nothing is selected. So you would think that my first impulse would be to manually go in, switch the color of the brush to a different one, make it a little bigger because we are coloring. Yeah, you would think that for this specific animation, it might be best to color it just all on the side, which we can do. We can totally do that. You know, it's going to take a little bit more time, but you're also going to see that because the color layer is beneath the final lines layer, that if we go over, it's getting on top of the background, which is totally fine, but it is not getting on top of our beautiful lines, which is great. So I could go through this and manually color in every single circle if I wanted to. I could. Or we can use another one of these tools. So I'm going to go to my final lines layer. I'm going to click this. And I'm going to click W to go to the Magic Wand tool. You can see it right here. Magic Wand tool is a great tool. And what I can do is I can select inside the circle, and you can click Control D to deselect. So with your W, with your Magic Wand tool selected, you can click outside the circle. It's going to select everything outside. Control D to deselect. And we're going to add another tool on top of this one. This helps with color a lot. So we're going to click outside, and I'm going to press Control Shift I. Now what that did, before I had selected everything outside of the circle. Control Shift I allows you to select the inverse of that. So it's going to be everything inside of our circle. So if I wanted to say, grab the paint fill, the paint bucket tool, which is what we're about to do, and I wanted to drop color, now it's going to drop color not everywhere outside, but everywhere inside. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to click G, which is going to grab our paint bucket tool. And you can grab it right over here too, if you want to do it manually like that. I'm going to make sure that I go down to my color layer, very important. And now I can just drop the color in. Let's do the next frame like that. We're going to first select our final lines. I'm going to click W. We're going to click outside. I'm going to click Control Shift I, G, down to color, click it in. Why I don't click inside sometimes to fill and to color is because I'll show you exactly what I mean. So I'm going to click G for my fill tool, go down to my color. I'm going to drop it in, and then I'm going to click Control D to deselect. And I'm zooming in with my fingers because I have a touch display, but you can click Control plus to zoom in. We see these kind of rough edges around. And it's because these pixels were not fully selected by the wand tool, which can happen. That's kind of why I select the outside and then I do the inverse trick, because it just selects everything that includes that kind of like that little roughness. There is another way to do it. Like Control D to undo, Control D to deselect. So we can use the wand tool to select everything inside, and then we can come up to here and we can go to select, modify, and then expand. This will expand all of the pixels that are in this circle currently. It will expand it out by like 3 pixels currently. We can change to as many pixels as we want. So if we change it to, say, 100 pixels, now all of this area is selected. But for now, we want to go back and expand it. For now, we want to maybe expand it by 10. And that way, now if we grab our bucket tool, we can add it in, and you'll see that it looks great on the edges. Okay, so now I'm just going to go through and I am going to fill the rest of that. Awesome. So we have it filled with color. Now maybe if we want to add some color into our background, and for this one, we can just paint it, bring that back, bring that in. What I can actually do, I want color behind my layers, or my lines, but I want those lines to stay the same. I'm gonna click that copy layer style. I'm going to deselect it from the group, and I'm just going to paste it on specifically my background lines. So now that if I added layer, drop this down so you can see, Now if I add a layer that is going to be called background color, now you can see that I will be able to paint, keeping that color the same. The last thing that I'll do is add a layer style to my color, just to kind of show you. I'm gonna undo that background layer. This one kind of is no longer looking of a piece. And say if I wanted some dimensionality to this, I think it all kind of is looking pretty consistent. Let's add a layer style onto this final lines too, because I kind of like it when my lines have color to them. Okay. Say that I wanted to add some dimensionality to this circle. Well, then I could just add a layer style to the color group, not to a specific layer, but to the whole group itself. So with that group selected, I'm going to come down, add a gradient overlay, and then make sure that it is 100%, that's normal, that we can see that it's looking good, creating a linear gradient, the dark side over here. We can tweak that if we want, just by going down and changing the angle. But that looks pretty good to me. And then we don't want it to be black and white exactly. We want it to kind of sit on top. So I can, change it down to this multiply layer. And we can see that that is adding some dimension. Doesn't look super consistent though, so we can actually change the color here. Instead of totally dark, let's have it maybe be kind of like this blue. There we go. Click OK. And instead of totally white, maybe let's have it a little bit closer. We can change our value. Maybe a little bit closer like that. Cool. And so this is looking good. We can do a bunch of other stuff, but for now, we'll just keep that the same. Awesome. It looks pretty snazzy. The potentials are very limitless. You can have these clouds animating, for instance. You can have your background on a video layer and actually get the movement. Your final lines, we can change them however we want. Some of these tools are very straightforward, but the imagination is limitless with them. So the last thing that we're going to do is we're going to export. So I'm going to click File, click Export. I'm going to render video. This is kind of where it's sitting at naturally. I'm going to, the name is fine. Maybe I'll call this Shot 1 version 1. If I'm going to make multiple shots of this film, we're just going to select a folder. Gonna maybe put it wherever you have your Animation 25502 digital tools folder that you've created, and I would rename this. We'll go 01, because it's technically first project that I would show you. You can name this, whatever you want, because it's just a demo. But we're gonna call this our little ball flying. And then my initials. And to export this, it's pretty simple. Sorry about that. We want, going back, we saved it to our Animation 255. We are going to save it inside of our ball flying. We're actually going to go into our output from Photoshop. And because we are exporting this out from the program Photoshop, we are going to use this folder, because that's where all of our exports from Photoshop are going to be. And because sometimes it can be a lot to have different shots, I'm just going to call this Shot 1, where all of Shot 1 is going to go. You can name it however you want, whatever keeps it organized for you. Cool, so it's going to go into our Shot 1. This is the whole long chain, just so we know. The Animation 255, it can go anywhere. You can drag it to a hard drive, you can drag it to a desktop, you can drag it to all over, but all of the things inside of it will stay put. So I'm going to change it real quick time to H.264. So we just want this as like a live video file that we're going to take in Premiere. All of this is looking very good. Our work area is correct. Work area, so it's going to export everything that is inside of that. This little kind of these two in and out. All of this is looking very solid. And I'm going to render. And I think it did it. Let's check to see if it did. So I will find my folder in my desktop, tools, ball line, output, from Photoshop, shot 1. And it did it. It exported. And now we can bring this into Premiere.